Hello everybody, I just thought I'd cover this little subject today. It's something I never covered before, but luckily today I have a car here, Mk5 Mondeo 2 litre diesel. It has a fault on it and its engine is actually going into limp mode. And I've read the code, which I'll show you in a minute, but it relates to this unit here. That is what you call an oil pressure control solenoid. It bolts into the oil filter housing on these engines, and it kind of regulates the oil pressure within the engine. It is read by the ECU, and it sort of like governs how much oil pressure is being pumped through your engine depending on engine load and driving conditions. But obviously, like all electrical components, well, electrical and mechanical I guess, they can go wrong, and these little units are going wrong quite often. I've changed quite a number of them. To give you an idea of the symptoms you're going to get, you can be driving along, your car will be driving perfectly fine, nothing wrong with it. 20, 30 miles, no problem. Then all of a sudden, you don't have to be accelerating hard or anything like that. You can just be driving along normally. And all of a sudden, your car will just go into limp mode or reduced power mode. Because what's happening is, when the ECU reads that solenoid is outside of its limits, or it kind of senses there's an oil pressure problem, to save the engine, the ECU will put your engine into reduced power mode. And unless you actually have got an oil pressure problem within your engine, which is highly unlikely, it's more likely it's going to be that solenoid's gone wrong. And you will find these solenoids on BMWs, they use them a lot. Not all that many cars use them solenoids, but they are put on these Mk5 Mondeos. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to plug our scanner in again, and I'm going to show you the code of the kind of code you're going to be looking at. And also, I'm going to show you how to change it, and it's really simple how to change it. But I thought I'd cover this subject anyway, just so you know for future reference, if you ever get this kind of problem on your car. So, let's crack the old scanner out, and I'll show you the code. There may well be different codes relating to this oil pressure control solenoid, but this particular one here, P06DD-00, engine oil pressure control circuit performance stuck off. For the very fact that this car has gone into limp mode, and this is the only code in the engine ECU, I think it's a fair chance to say that the oil pressure control solenoid has got a problem. So I'm going to take it out and replace it. As it just happens, we've got a spare engine here. This engine will get used next week because we happen to have one engine that's actually locked up where the crankshaft shells are bollocksed, and we've got another engine where I think it's got a lack of compression in it. So I've got two engines to change anyway, but this engine, I'll just show you quickly. Here is the oil control solenoid. You see it's right next to the oil pressure switch, situated in the whole oil filter housing assembly with the oil cooler. That all comes as one great big assembly if you buy that, because quite often these things will leak oil and you've got to change a whole lot anyway. So I could unbolt it here, but what I was thinking, it'd be better if I actually showed it on the car. So I shall walk over to the old car in question. Here it is, the troublesome bloody Mondeo. I don't know why I've just lifted the goddamn bonnet, because the part we need is underneath here. So I'll take it up in the air and we'll see if we can get this solenoid out. Okay, you will need one oil bucket to catch the bloody oil that's going to drip out of this thing. Also, if you've got an under tray on your engine, you'll have to remove that. Now, there it is, there's our oil filter, and there it is, just there. So what I would suggest, a little electrical terminal, if you've got a little pick like that, you could get it just in there, and you can kind of flick up the little tab, and that's it. Pull that electrical terminal off. I'm sorry about this shaky video, I'm just trying to do this in one hand. So I'll pull that wiring out of the way. There's a 10mm nut, which I've already undone, just there. So you don't need, let me just say this, you do not need to move all the air conditioning pipes out of the way. You don't have to touch nothing. All you've got to do is take that plug connector off and undo that 10mm nut. So if you want to use a lever bar, just give it a very gentle tap like that, very, very gently, and you'll see that probably moves. That is actually coming out. You see, it's nearly off the threads there, but we're going to have some oil dripping out, which is actually already started to drip. So I'm going to see if I can pull this out of my hand now. Okay, we're out. It's almost touching the air conditioning pipe there, but it will clear and it will just kind of drop out. So it will clear the pipes. So you ain't got to worry about unbolting any air conditioning pipes. And there we go. Let's bring this out into the open. See that little wire gauze there? If that was covered in metal swarf, then you'd have a big problem. But as this one isn't, we haven't got that much of a problem. But these solenoids do go wrong quite regularly. So this one is going to go in the dustbin. And I've got a nice brand spanking new one coming from Ford. Well, my afternoon parts delivery has arrived from Ford. And here is our brand spanking new solenoid, all nice and shiny. How much does it cost? One solenoid, £123.32, including VAT, that is. There's one thing I'm going to point out here. This is brand new solenoid. This should slide straight into that housing that I took the old one out of. If you were changing your oil filter housing, the whole assembly, and you were fitting an old solenoid out of the old housing and putting it into a brand spanking new housing, what I would suggest is this just little bit here, get it on the wire wheel and give it a little bit of a clean up, because otherwise you'll probably struggle to get this into the new housing. But because this is a brand new one, this should fit straight in, no problem whatsoever. There's also a little oil seal there, you'll notice, so you don't want to damage that. And what I normally do, I'll move it off the receipt, I use a little bit of the old silicone spray, so you can just put a tiny bit on that seal and that'll help it go in. Right, so I'm now going to pop this in. It's a little bit tight up here, I must say, but there, and that has literally gone straight in. It just needs a slight little push. Boop, you hear that? That just popped in. But as I was saying a minute ago, if this was a brand new oil filter housing assembly, and you took the old solenoid out and you were putting it in a brand spanking new one, you'll find it probably won't fit very well. It'll be very tight going in. That's why I say clean that little bit up. Clean that end bit up, the little chamfer bit here. Clean it up with a wire wheel or something, and then it will go in a lot easier. And put some of that silicone spray on it. But yeah, obviously this one here, because we're using an old oil filter housing assembly and a brand spanking new solenoid, they literally just fall straight back in, no problem whatsoever. So I'm going to refit our 10mm nut and tighten that up and put our plug connector back on. So that's it, all fitted nicely. The 10mm is tightened up, our wiring harness, plug connectors back on. So all I really have to do now, start the engine up. I'll run it on the ramp for a little while, make sure there's no oil leaks coming from it. It's always worth checking. And then give the car a good old run down the road and hope there's no more limp mode problems. I've just gave this engine an oil and filter change anyway, and I've refilled it with like 6.5 litres of 0W30 engine oil. So we're going to have some nice clean oil going through this new solenoid. Put the old ignition on. The little spanner light is because I changed the fuel filter, so that's nothing to worry about. But yeah, it's running quite nicely. In actual fact, that spanner light, as soon as the fuel pressure gets to the right amount, it will extinguish it anyway. Yep, our spanner light is now out. Fuel level low, there's nothing new. Taxi drivers only like putting like £10 in at a time. So I say I'll run it up for about 10 minutes. I'll make sure there's no leaks coming from anywhere, anything I've touched. You never know, do you? You fit a new part and then it starts leaking. It can happen. So I'll check that out first, and then I'll give it a good run down the road and make sure the car doesn't go back into limp mode. Woo! That's it. I've been for a right good road test. No engine management lights, no limp home mode. But there again, I was 99% positive that solenoid was going to cure the problem anyway. It's not the first time this has happened. In fact, this has happened multiple times now. I just bung a new solenoid in, job done. Car doesn't play up anymore. Also, the Ford dealership kind of keeps these solenoids in stock. What does that tell you? Anyway, if this affects you, you'll probably know how to fix it next time, won't you? So, hope it helps, and I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.